Read off. No. Success? Good. Alright, John to the rescue. So, once again, hi. So let's start, because we're running a little late. As you guys know, today we're covering Plato's Republic, which is all around an exciting time. Start of our last section, coming into the home stretch. And the timing worked out pretty well, considering that, well, interesting things are happening in the American Republic as we speak. So, now, everyone can see my screen? All right, great. Let's begin with Plato's Republic. So as always, we have our outline. So we have introduction, why are we talking about Plato's Republic, biography, who was Plato, historical background, or the historical circumstances influenced Plato, what did Plato believe, what influenced his beliefs, and how did he argue. We're going to read from the Republic, which is the work that we're talking about today. So, introduction, talking about Plato's Republic. So, we're going back to ancient Greece, to the start of political science. So it's a strange book. An incredibly important book, but it is certainly a strange one. So in this book, Plato lays out a theory of justice, an ideal city, knowledge, and the arts. And the weird thing about this book is he doesn't lay out multiple theories of justice, ideal city, knowledge, and the arts. No, this is all one theory. And we'll sort of discuss why this is. But it's strange. The only part of this theory that we're going to really cover today is Plato's ideal city, because that's what's influential for how things should work for every political scientist after Plato. I'll be taking my cues mostly from Russell on this one, who insists we can't really understand Plato's Republic outside of Plato's philosophical and historical background. So both of those are quite important to understanding what he comes up with. Another thing that Russell says is it's common to praise Plato but not understand him. So that's another error that I'm going to try very hard to avoid. Is we're all going not just to praise Plato and be like, oh wow, such a great philosopher. We're going to understand what he says and the strengths and the weaknesses. All right. So introduction to Plato's Republic, the start of the last section. It's the strange first great work of political science. So, biography. Who was Plato? So, as I said, we're back in ancient Greece. So, Plato was born to a wealthy aristocratic family in Athens around 424 BC. So, Socrates is put to death around 400 BC. So, Plato was presumably well educated. presumably here is because a lot is disputed about Plato's early history, including whether his name is Plato, whether that's a nickname, or something else entirely. So Plato was a devoted follower of Socrates. He lists himself as present at Socrates' trial. After Socrates' death, Plato may have traveled around the Mediterranean. And sorry, it's again may, we're not sure. He definitely returned to Greece to found a school. Just for your personal interest, there's a lot of argument about how much Greek philosophy owes to Egyptian philosophy. And from there, you can also have an argument if Greece owes its philosophy to Egypt, then that means, Western culture owes its philosophy to some extent to African culture. So the may have has been argued about a ton. Now, Plato's school in Greece became entangled with the city-state of Syracuse, and Plato ended up on the wrong side of this and was briefly sold into slavery. So things got a lot rougher for him after Socrates' death. And finally, he died at around 348 BC at age 80, which, if true, and again, there's a lot of maybes in Plato's life, but if true, is pretty remarkable. Because, that for our age, that's reasonably old. For ancient Greece, presumably that was very old. So, outline biography of Plato. He was an aristocrat, he was an ancient Greek, and he's one of the first philosophers and a follower of Socrates. All right, seems pretty straightforward so far. So let's talk about the historical background of Plato then. So Plato, like Socrates and like Aristotle, lives through the end of the Golden Age of Athens, and Athens lost in the Peloponnesian War. So I'll remind you again what these are like, because they're really crucial for understanding Plato's ideas. So we're going to cover the same stuff we covered with Socrates way back in the beginning. Speaking of which, just to check how you guys are remembering things, this painting here, what is this painting of? Someone tell me in the chat. Yes, exactly. It's the death of Socrates, and you always know which one Socrates is because he's pointing up in paintings. And yep, this is the hemlock that he's about to drink. Plato is not depicted in this painting, which is historically accurate, because he wasn't at Socrates' death. All right. So let's go through the Golden Age of Athens again. So Plato was alive during an incredible time in history, namely ancient Athens, and its time declining as the most powerful city-state in ancient Greece. And again, if you guys don't quite remember, at this point, Greece is divided into city-states. So there'd be one main city, and then satellite towns and whatever, and farms. And that was Greece. They were quite small. So why was this such an incredible time and place in history? Well, look at the other people who were alive at the same time as Plato. So the first playwrights, the first people who write proper plays, Aeschylus, Euripides, Sophocles, Aristophanes. So the first historians, by which I mean the first people to really try to tell an accurate picture of history and put it into a logical format. And that's the idea, right? You're not just telling random stories, it's a logical format. This happened, therefore this happened. That's Herodotus and Thucydides. The first doctor, Hippocrates, and any of you who know anything about medicine have heard of the Hippocratic Oath. The greatest statesman of the ancient world, Pericles, and you might say the first mathematician, although depends on how you define things, Pythagoras. So this is a pretty incredible time in terms of the people, and in terms of the general atmosphere, in terms of what's being done, everything's being put in a logical system. There's this attempt to understand everything logically, whether it's the logical way to write a play, the logical way to tell the story of history, the logical way to do medicine, logical way to rule a state, or the logical way to do math. And we'll see this impact on Plato, because Plato's political science, what he thinks a government should be, is also very logical. And so here we have a modern artist conception of what this would look like. This is obviously very, very idealized, but it is a pretty picture. All right. Peloponnesian War. So after the Greek states defeat Persia, they formed a league, and this is about around 100 years before Plato. They formed a league to prevent another Persian attack. Athens grew in power and influence, started off powerful, got more powerful, created a giant fleet using money from this league, and the League of Independent States was turned into an Athenian empire. So you can imagine the other Greek states aren't thrilled about this. The fact that their League of Independent States meant to defend them against Persia has been turned into an empire for Athens, and Athens gets all this money for their fleet and to build public works. So the Spartans, at the end of the day, are the only state capable of defying Athens because they have the best army in all of Greece. So Sparta, as you remember, is militaristic in its slave owning. Their economy is based on slaves. It's based on warfare because they're constantly capturing slaves. And the actual Spartans, the citizens, devote pretty much all their efforts, intelligence, organization to the military. They're not very artistic, but they are really good at waging war. So if you guys saw the movie 300, it's not remotely historically accurate, but that is the Spartans. So over the course of three mini wars, so scraps, combination of battles, Athens' fleet gets destroyed, cities impoverished. Actually, not only is Athens' fleet destroyed, Athens almost gets turned into slaves. So a lot of the city-states wanted to turn every Athenian into a slave, and Sparta intervened and just said, no, we only have to impoverish them. So Sparta becomes the ruling power in Greece after this. So by 400 BC, the golden age of Athens has ended, and everything goes downhill from here for Athens. So why does this have influence on Plato? Well, because when Plato talks about the ideal city, about what cities should be, it seems pretty obvious, and we'll see, that Plato is influenced, and we might even say traumatized, So, you know, like a child would be traumatized by a scary movie. So Plato's like traumatized by the fall of Athens. So you'll notice his city is highly organized. It's almost communist. And again, it is very strange. And I think the only way to understand why he um, uh, creates such a strange city is because of the fall of Athens. And again, artist depiction of the fall of Athens. Parthenon on fire. I think that's Parthenon, or it's supposed to be the Parthenon. All right. So, historical background, end of the golden age of Greece, the fall of Athens, Plato's traumatized. All right, good stuff. Do we have any questions before we go on to philosophy? Tinchu Lamat. All right. His ideal state was quite like Sparta. We'll cover. We'll cover. You can think for yourself. That's not a bad idea. So think for yourself about how Plato is influenced like by Sparta. All right. So in starting with Plato's philosophy, we're not going to cover all of it in this class. We're not going to cover most of it in this class. We're really focused in on his vision of an ideal city as laid out in his Republic. As I've told you guys before, if this was a different class, if I was a different teacher, we might have covered Plato in the how to think section. But I don't really like his philosophy about how to think, so I didn't include it in there. So the introduction and lead-in to Plato's ideal city is really strange. And I know I've said this before, but just listen. So it's a dialogue with Socrates, where Socrates is challenged to come up with an idea of justice. And you have to understand here, Socrates, even though Plato says this is Socrates and Plato never says this is fiction, we're still supposed to understand this isn't the real Socrates. This is Plato using the name of Socrates as a character in his book. So justice, by the way, is a very interesting word for the Greeks. Yeah, he's a mouthpiece. That's a good way of thinking about it. Justice is an interesting word for the Greeks, and it's not what we think of as justice. It really means everything in its proper place. So you guys remember Aristotle's philosophy, where Aristotle has this idea of there are better men and there are worse men. And, you know, the best men get the best things, and the morality is for the best men to be, you know, sort of nice to the worst guys, but like still to get everything. So that was justice according to Aristotle, because everything was in its proper place. So one thing that can be confusing is if you learn about Plato's Republic on your own or in another class, people will debate a lot about what Plato's trying to accomplish here, why he thinks his city is just, why he thinks it's an example of justice. Just remember that when he says justice, he doesn't mean the same thing that we do. So he means that everything is in its proper place. All right. So Socrates, after a lot of challenges to what the idea of justice is, and he's actually arguing here with a skeptic. He eventually says that justice would be better explained if he tries to explain it in terms of a city rather in terms of a person, because it's easier to describe justice in terms of many people. So if this logical leap seems strange to you, like, you know, why would he say, like, well, I don't really have a good idea of what justice is for one person, but it's really easy to say what justice is for many people. You're not alone. It seems sort of clear that Plato just wanted to talk about the ideal city, and he used this as an excuse. That's my opinion anyways. But this is his justification. All right, John, translation?
But justice is kind of interpersonal relationship. Never say that it is a personal justice, but this case is so injustice or something.
So yeah,
Yes.
so if in that case we would have to really get into the definition of justice.
Yeah.
So I think our big problem here would just be what we come up with as justice, as a common sense definition of justice, is going to be really different from what Plato comes up with.
I see. We use the term justice also in different ways. It's different than when we say that this person is just.
All right.
Yeah.
John, we're getting complaints that you're a little too quiet.
没问题。我现在翻译就是我们现在说，今天我们会谈柏拉图的理想国，但是只限于他的理想国。在理想国中，当然最重要的概念就是公正或者说正义的概念。然后正义的概念呢，对于柏拉图来说，柏拉图总是用苏格拉底的名字。虽然呢，那苏格拉底不知道是不是历史上的苏格拉底，来传达柏拉图的意思。那苏格拉底呢，开始谈论正义的时候呢，他是从一个城市的角度，而不是个人的角度来开始谈论正义的。
All right. Good. So, foundations of the city. So, in terms of foundations of the city, Plato's city will be divided into three classes: his common people, soldiers, and guardians. So guardians, someone who guards things, right? And here Plato means it as a more general term of like someone who guards the city. So there will be only a few guardians who will be given all the political power in the city, all the power to make decisions. So these classes of people will, for the most part, be based on what class your parents were in, whether they were common people, soldiers, or guardians. Although the first generation, when he starts the city, will be chosen by legislation. So the lawmakers will decide. Also, in rare cases, children may be promoted or demoted from guardians to soldiers or soldiers to guardians. And by the way, if you guess what sort of person gets to be a guardian, and you guess that it's Plato, you would be correct. Plato is like, I would be a great person to rule the city. Yes, it is a caste system, very much so.
Guardians like politicians and policemen in the country.
Yeah, I'm not sure about policemen, definitely politicians. And they definitely make the laws, and they'd probably be the judges as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Plato is basically saying people like me should have unquestioned power over the city. So there are no gender distinctions in this city. Men and women may be in any of these three classes. They could be common people, soldiers, or guardians. And the most important part of this city's class distinction, of this caste distinction, is education. It's how the guardians are brought up and taught to rule. So Plato really cares a lot about their education. So presumably he should care about how soldiers and common people are educated as well, but Plato never really talks that much about them. So you're just left to assume that he cares, but never really um, says it. In terms of the justification, by the way, to answer a question in the comments, so utilitarianism, we're not sure. So Plato is saying, remember, Plato is framing this in terms of justice. So his initial justification is this would be the most just city. And we'll talk later about, it does seem like there's a different sort of justification here for this city. There does seem to be, you need something more. So the question of why this is the best city, why this is the most just city, is a good one. By the way, this comic here, this is from, I think it's called Philosophy Comics. I forget the name of the comic right now, but it's sort of funny. So King Plato, one of your lords, has attacked our outpost. We demand justice. What is justice? What? Well, you say you want justice, so you must know what it is. Look, I don't have time for that. So this is King Plato as a philosopher king. He's not doing a great job right now. But all right, John.
Yeah. 所以我们就看到他现在开始描绘他的城市，然后他把他的城市分成3部分，当然是守卫者、士兵和一般的平民。然后呢，当然在这3种人中，柏拉图没有对男女性进行区分，然后呢，最重要的事情呢，就是柏拉图开始做出这个区分以后，柏拉图就开始谈论这3种人的教育。当然，let's go on.
All right. So 有问题吗？ No? Good. All right. So education. So we talked about education. My Chinese, I hope it's getting better. I don't think it's actually getting better, but thank you for the compliment. So education. So as we talked about, the education is really important because this is how the guardians are brought up. This is sort of the justification for why the guardians ruling the city. So Plato cares a lot about education. Also, practically speaking, he's a man who started his own school, which could be considered the first university in the world. So Plato cares a lot. So education for Plato is 2 parts. There's culture and there's physical training. So learning culture, it's really carefully regimented what exactly culture is and what they can learn. So it's designed to promote only qualities of a gentleman, so an aristocrat like Plato, and the qualities of a soldier. So the only literature children are allowed to read has the following messages. Only good things come from the gods. So the gods never cause anything bad. There's no reason to fear death. So that's a pretty clear soldier's code. Men must master all emotions. So you have to make sure you're never too happy, too sad, anything like that. And good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. So Plato knows these things aren't true, but he says this is what your literature has to tell the children. Good things from the gods, no reason to fear death, master emotions. Good things happen to good people, bad things happen to bad people. So because of this, Homer is outlawed, as are most poets. So anyone who writes accurately about humanity or writes in the Greek tradition of anthropomorphizing their gods So, if you know anything about Greek literature, like Zeus and Hera are constantly getting in fights, and Zeus goes and sleeps with some human woman, and then Hera gets mad and causes something bad to happen to that human woman. None of that is allowed in Plato's city. So the three classes of so this is specifically for the guardians, and as I said, like Plato talks a lot about what the education the guardians should get, and we have to assume that there's something probably similar but not but lesser for the rest of the classes, the other two classes, but it's probably not quite as involved in this. All right. So for a similar reason, though, the Greek tradition of drama must be repressed. So the only people an actor should ever portray should be perfect male heroes of good birth. So Plato reasons drama's not possible because you can't have an interesting play if everyone is just a perfect hero, if you have no villains.
Boring.
It is really boring. Plato actually says if an actor would come to a city, Plato would say the people should praise him for his skill, say that's great that you're an actor, but you have to leave now because we're not gonna let you like perform at all. So it is a really boring city. So yes, Plato's people would have to use a VPN. So to continue, unsurprisingly, the only music that's allowed is music to promote courage and temperance, and Plato actually explains to us exactly what sort of music that is. And it's the same thing with food. Food has to promote courage and temperance. And temperance here is like you never go too extreme, you never drink too much, anything like that. So food, no fish, meat is only roasted, you're not allowed to prepare it any other way, and no sauces. The benefit of this, according to Plato, is you'll never need a doctor if you eat like this. That's what Plato thinks, is if you never eat fish, then you don't need a doctor. So at a certain point in life, a child must be exposed to all the ugly parts of life. So the ugly parts of life are things that would scare him and things that would lead him into vice. So things that would make him, sin, act badly, whatever. So if he can withstand not being scared and not being tempted, he's ready to be a guardian. From my perspective, it seems really hard to believe that like you have a boy who's been, sort of deprived of everything fun throughout his entire life. And then they're all of a sudden like, here's a glass of beer and like, a chance to go out with a pretty girl. And then he has to be like, nope, I'm good. I just want to like keep continuing on my life as like never doing anything fun. But maybe this is why I'm not well suited to be a guardian, because I would be too tempted. All right.
And I think I would like to add some
Yes.
important point.
Go for it.
I think he emphasized somewhere that the children should be separated from the parents and educated publicly, actually, in a centralized place or something, with parents.
So that's something that's really important, and we'll talk about in a bit. Is Plato also really emphasizes as a strong control and breakdown of the family unit, and so that's included in education. So yeah, that's a good point, and we can discuss that more in a bit.
Like Karl Marx.
Yes. Well, there's a reason why people say Plato was a proto-communist.
Okay. 所以就在就是他就开始 Plato 就开始谈论所谓的尤其是守卫者的教育的问题。然后呢，我们刚才大家已经略有耳闻了，就是对于守卫者的教育很重要的一点就是培养守卫者的一种政治家和士兵的美德，尤其是所谓的节制的美德。那在这节制的美德，或者说在这个节制啊、勇敢啊这些美德的培养过程中呢，会有一系列的措施。首先呢，就是年轻人一定要把他们和文艺的作品分开，包括诗人，包括大部分的悲剧和喜剧。然后呢，一切只有音乐是允许的，但是也仅仅限于那些能够锻炼人的意志，能够引起人的美德的音乐才能够被允许，并且食物我们刚才看到也是非常节制的一个安排。然后呢，作为国家的统治者，他当然要有面临痛苦、面临龌龊的这样子的一个怎么说呢？这样子一种很让人痛苦的训练。然后yeah.
Yeah, I haven't gotten onto that yet.
Yeah.
All right.
I got so fast.
All right. Cool stuff. So let's talk about the economics of the city. So we've talked about the education of the city. You know, it's this classless city. You have 3 classes. You're going to raise your children in the most boring way possible. Now let's talk about the economics. How is it run? So Plato's city is what we would call today communist, although of course, you know, Plato didn't have the word. So the guardians have these small houses, they have simple food, they dine together. And there's no private property beyond what's absolutely necessary. So you never amass like, you know, private goods. And Plato has a really interesting justification for this, or maybe not justification, but he says one thing that this would really help is his city would find it very easy to make military allies because they would never want spoils of war. So I don't really think Plato is a great general for thinking that. That doesn't seem to be accurate militarily, but it's interesting that Plato relies on that. So this communism, as John mentioned, it applies to the family as well. So women and children are shared. So wives are communal, children are communal. Raising children is pretty communal. So child rearing is communist. There's a twist, and it's again this is maybe the weirdest thing that Plato thinks. So the way people have kids is at certain festivals, men and women are brought together to have kids, and they're gonna tell everyone it's at random. So they're gonna claim like, you know, you just randomly draw lots, and you get paired with a random woman, and you have kids with her. But in reality, the legislators who will be, you know, guardians, will arrange it so that only the best men and women have children, while the rest do not. So the only people who get to have children are the best people. And then children at birth will be taken away from their parents to be raised communally, and any inferior children will be killed. So this is it's strange, it's weird, it's sort of horrible. Specifically this festival is really impractical. Like, you know, how are you going to make sure that like this is the only time that people ever try to have kids? But like also, you know, it's terrible. Like you understand, like, you know, he's an aristocrat. He you probably bred dogs, you bred horses. So you understand how he'd think, oh yeah, best men and women should be the only ones having children. But like, how would you possibly like perpetuate that huge of a lie in your city for any length of time? Like, I don't think even like a country like North Korea could manage that. And that's sort of the whole thing. It's hard to imagine how this whole thing would survive for a long period of time without breaking down. But to continue, every man is to call every older man father, and every man his age brother. And same goes for women. You know, you call every older woman sister or mother, and you call every woman your age sister. And the reason why Plato enforces language here is that everyone will supposedly be nice to each other, because if you don't know who your real father is, if you don't know who your real brother is, you'll be nice to everyone. And I'll just say, you know, I've known some families in my life who are much more likely to be kind to someone if they don't think they're related to them. But you know, things were maybe different in ancient Greece. All right, John.
所以，柏拉图的城市当然是一个非常非常公有制程度非常高的城市。那主要就是首先呢，它对私有财产的保护降得非常低，尤其是平民和士兵是不能有私有财产的，而守卫者呢，因为有特殊的需要，他们可能保留极少的个人财产。那么为了锻炼守卫者之间的情感，他们也被要求在一起生活。那至于孩子的生产呢，那当然是有对于柏拉图来说，可能是针对两个阶层的人，就是平民是在可能比如说在当时他的希腊的原型可能有些酒神狂欢节上可以自由交购。那尤其是对于守卫者的孩子来说，那当然需要就是用优生的方法生产出比较基因良好的孩子。那比较差的小孩下一代呢会被杀掉，但是呢这可能也不是太可怕的事情，因为当时雅典周边的城市或者周边的国家都是这么做的。然后呢，在这样子的一个地方，当然没有人知道自己的父母是谁的情况下，那当然整个城市就是一个大家庭，所以所有的老人都被叫成父亲，而所有呢稍微年长的人就被叫为哥哥。一切都很清楚。大家现在有问题吗？
All right. Looks like people are getting the picture. All right, cool. So as Russell describes, one of the strangest part of Plato's city, is that the government is tasked with propagating certain lies. So the government has to tell lies to all the people. And we've already seen one of them with the supposedly random mating. Like, you know, supposedly people get chosen to have kids at random, but really it's specific people get to have kids. The most important myth, however, according to Plato, is that the people must believe that the guardians are made of gold, the warriors of silver, and the common people of brass and iron. And this is why they're given different tasks. This is why the guardians rule the city, soldiers protected, and presumably the common people just work. So, in other words, it's not just people are differently skilled; they're different fundamentally. They're made of different things, and that's why they have different tasks. So here, I'm pretty sure these two are from video games, and this one is from a comic book, to illustrate what it would mean to have someone made out of gold, someone made out of silver, and someone made out of iron. I hope these illustrations help Yeah, John.
Okay.
Are the questions in the comments? I can in the chat. I can see anything.
Oh yeah, because I chose that actually the people around them did kill the children sometimes, like the Spartans.
Yeah. So that Plato takes the whole killing inferior children thing. So the Spartans did that, and it's actually not that uncommon even today to kill children who are either disabled or even just the wrong gender. In I mean, rural China, in Vietnam, in lots of poor countries where if you're relying on children as sort of your insurance policy, or you're relying on children to help you in your old age, or to just help you on the farm as they grow up, it's really not worth it to have a kid that can't help you. So it's sort of like a horrible thing that, fortunately for us, living in a modern society, we don't really, or modern parts of society, we don't really see. But even today, and certainly in Plato's time, killing children who are born with some sort of defects was not, it's not something they were proud of, but it's something that was very common.
Okay, should I do the
Yeah.
translation?
Sure.
所以柏拉图呢很清楚的认识到，其实人没有这样子的差别，但是呢，他不得不为了权势的统治宣传一种血统论也好、出生论也好的一些，柏拉图是叫神话，但是呢，对他来说这是对统治者或者对国家有利的神话。这些神话呢，比如说宣传人不同特质，统治者是由金子构成的，士兵是银子构成的，那普通的市民呢，或者说普通的人呢，就是由铜或者铁构成的，这样子大家在各个阶层之间安然的待着，不能互相逾越。
Alright. So Plato's utopia. So Plato is creating this as the best city. So Russell, to address this, ask two questions. Can the city be founded? Was it ever practical to make a city like this? And would it be a good city? So to the first question, if it could have ever been founded, Russell says yes. According to Russell, such a hierarchical society was to some extent already in Sparta, and the lies that the city was based on could have worked if the education was thorough enough, and presumably if the people didn't read Plato, because it would be really awkward if you tried to form a city based on Plato's Republic, and you know the first time you try to do the random mating thing, people are like, wait, I remember this, I read this section, this isn't random at all. So in terms of my opinion, well, Russell actually says himself, after the rise of Macedonia, so Alexander the Great, well, first Philip the Great and then his son Alexander the Great, it's hard to imagine this city being very successful, because you really, in Macedonia, Philip the Great changed the politics of the region a lot. You either have to be a great city and able to stand up against them like Sparta, or you get subjugated. There's no, you can't exist alongside them. I think it would have been pretty difficult to found a city like this, actually. Founding a city is hard. Founding a city with such a rigid and strange culture would be especially hard. I mean, Sparta's hierarchical society worked because that was their economy. It reinforced their army, it reinforced their military, and then their economy was based around their military because they constantly needed to get new slaves. Plato's culture wouldn't really help the economy, I don't think. So I can't imagine this ever being a real city. Um, so Russell then answers his second question though. Would it be a good city? And Russell says no. Like everyone would be in their proper place, which I guess would be good according to Plato. You know, that's his idea of justice. But it wouldn't be culturally successful. I mean, they outlaw so many different forms of art. They outlaw so many different forms of music and literature. There's no drama allowed whatsoever. And you know, you can't imagine philosophers or anything doing particularly well in this city. And it probably wouldn't be that great militarily either. It probably would have never been as successful as Sparta or certainly of Macedonia. Um, and I think this is generally true when you think of the most rigidly controlled like countries in the world, societies in the world. They don't tend to be successful societies. You know, to go back to North Korea or other countries with similar dictatorships, they're not. They don't do that well. They don't accomplish that much. They're sort of interesting to read about and terrifying to think about. But in terms of how successful they are, they're really not. Um, yeah. So that's Plato's Utopia. Dylan?
Yeah，所以就是刚才 Trevor 在进行一些反思，就是柏拉图的这样子的一个城市的图景到底能不能工作？当然呢，某些程度上呢，其实这样的城市已经工作了。比如说呢，在附近的斯巴达，虽然说很多比如说财产被公有化，比如说这种中央教育孩子的政策，都已经工作的很好，但是呢，这是不是严格意义上的一个好的城市呢？或者说柏拉图描绘的图景和斯巴达当时展现的情况到底有什么差别呢？是不是就是一个斯巴达加上一些更好的教育，或者说或者说是一个或者说是一个有文化版的斯巴达，它对于文化的发展到底有多少贡献？就是因为柏拉图他们那一代所谓雅典的辉煌，完全不是建立在这样的城市体系之上的，所以关于柏拉图这样子的图景的绘制，我们需要特别的小心，也要进行同样的反思，到底柏拉图在说这些事情的时候，他到底在想什么？他到底是不是真的这样想的？
All right. So it is 10:03, which means time for a 5-minute break. So when we come back, we'll go over philosophical background and we'll read from Plato's Republic directly. So I'll see you guys back here at 10:08. So 10:08, I'll see you back here. Yeah, see you in a bit. So how things should work is focusing on political philosophy. Yes. Broadly speaking, yeah, except for Jane Jacobs at the end, who is the founder of urban studies. But we don't spend a ton of time on her, because a lot of the last class is bringing everything together. By the way, that nice handwriting is Gushu's. Unfortunately, I can't write nearly that nicely. All right. So, any questions before we go on or go back? No? Ready to begin again? All right. So, philosophy, Plato desired a rigid hierarchical city with a strange culture based on lies. So, background to Plato's philosophy. So there are clear precedents for Plato's philosophical beliefs, but it's hard to understand why a man coming from a society famous for its democracy, openness, and freedom of inquiry. So, democracy, obviously, every citizen can vote. Openness, they talk about everything. Freedom of inquiry, you can really ask about anything you want. They're trying to find truth. So Plato is one of the most famous philosophers coming from this. So why does he want a city that's hierarchical, that's not democratic, that's rigid, so it's not open, and it's based on lies. So there's no way there could be freedom of inquiry. So really, the only answer that I can come up with for his political science, for how he comes up with this city, is that he's traumatized by the destruction of Athens. Because Athens, which was his city, which was the city of philosophers, it was humbled, and its intellectual achievements didn't really matter in the face of, well, the Spartans and their allies. The armed and dumb came out on top. So I think his ideal city here is one which certainly has a lot of relation to the Spartans, to a hierarchical society like that. But I think more than anything, he's thinking it's a city that would survive. It wouldn't end up like Athens, being in a disastrous war that would wipe it out. I think that's his real end goal here, is how can I make a city that would survive and not end up fighting all of Greece and losing terribly. All right. So I think that makes sense. Doesn't need translation. So let's go on and read the Republic. Read it directly. So as I mentioned, the Republic's probably written around 380 BC, and the history of it is really, really complicated. So it came to the Byzantines, so the eastern side of the Roman Empire and the part that survives after the West collapses. So it came to the Byzantines from an Egyptian Greek astrologer named Thrasyllus, and then came from the Byzantines to the European world during the Renaissance, and then from the Europeans to us, the Americans, and for you guys, the Chinese. So we'll be looking at Book 5 of the Republic, where Socrates, and I have this in quotation marks because it's Plato's mouthpiece, because it's Plato speaking through the voice of Socrates, defends the stranger parts of Plato's Republic. And here's an old cover from Penguin Classics. Obviously, this isn't the actual original cover because no one knows what the original cover was. So, as always, I'll read it directly, read translation, comment on it if need be, and then John will translate. So, the main players of this dialogue of that Plato is writing are Thrasymachus, who's a skeptic. Skeptic, as you recall, is this philosophical school that helps lead to the Stoics, right? And the way they lead to the Stoics is the skeptics doubt everything. They never really believe in a firm, in a definite idea of history. And Socrates and Thrasymachus are talking. There's also two other people, Glaucon and Adeimantus, and they're listening, but they're not hostile, and they don't talk as much or challenge Socrates as much as Thrasymachus does. So Socrates starts off by protesting that when they're asking him for specifics on his ideas, for more specifics about what his city will actually be, he might sound overconfident on something that he isn't really that sure about. Let me tell you that you are doing just the reverse. The encouragement which you offer would have been all very well had I myself believed that I knew what I was talking about. You declare the truth about matters of high interest, which a man honors and loves among wise. Men who love him need occasion no fear or faltering in his mind. To carry on an argument when you are yourself only a hesitating inquirer, which is my condition, is a dangerous and slippery thing. And the danger is not that I shall be laughed at, of which the fear would be childish, but that I shall miss the truth where I most need to be sure of my footing, and drag my friends after me in my fall. So, the simple translation, Socrates says, well, it'd be all right for you to encourage me to say more if I was confident in what I was saying. I was really confident in exactly what I believed. But he says, I'm not confident. He says, I'm not afraid that you'll not believe me and that you'll laugh at me, because it would be childish to be afraid of that. I'm afraid that I'll say something wrong and that you'll believe me. And so then I'll be leading you astray. So in terms of commentary on this, the fact that Socrates is saying this means that we have to assume that Plato is saying this. So Plato isn't really sure of his argument here. And it's a strange thing that Plato does, because he does this in other works. He starts off by saying, I'm not really sure if this is true. I'm not sure if this is right. Then it can make it very difficult to figure out what he actually believes. Because a lot of times it just seems like he's saying things, but we're not sure if he really believes them or not. So it's interesting for sure, and it's very different from almost any other philosopher we'll read. All right, John.
所以在这里啊，我们就接触到了柏拉图在《理想国》中4个最主要的角色，当然最主要的还是 Thrasymachus 和苏格拉底本人。那至于 Glaucon 和 Adeimantus， 他们就是在一边打酱油，但是有时候也会说话的2个角色。然后呢，这里当然牵涉到这段话牵涉到一个非常重要的苏格拉底 方法，苏格拉底的他总是不做一些非常正面的声称，总是在访问别人一些事情，当别人很厌恶，当然我们知道这种谈话的对象是非常让人讨厌的。那在苏格拉底自己也被问到为什么他不做正面宣称的时候，他做了这样子的一点解释，这其实是一个方法论上的澄清，就是说那你们觉得我总是不愿意在重要的事情上做出声称，那是这样子的，因为我并不是怕我做出了错误的声称被人笑了，而是呢我就怕就是我做出了太决绝的声称，让我们丧失了这样子一个讨论或者说更好的接近真理的机会。那我们看到，其实如果你细细的去读柏拉图放在亚里士多德嘴里的那些对话的话，大家也会发现，就是一直是沿着这种所谓的苏格拉底式的方法在不断的推进讲话的情节的。
All right. So Socrates says, I'm worried that I'm gonna say something wrong, and his friends say, don't worry, we'll be cautious. We won't necessarily believe everything that you say. So Socrates is reassured, and so he begins by explaining his idea of gender equality. And he does it in a very Socratic manner.
Yes.
Ooh, thank you. So for men born and educated like our citizens, the only way, in my opinion, of arriving at a right conclusion about the possession and use of women and children is to follow the path on which we originally started, when we said that the men were to be the guardians and watchdogs of their herd. Let us further suppose that the birth and education of our women will be subject to similar or nearly similar regulations, then we shall see whether the result accords with our design. What I mean may be put in the form of a question. I said, are dogs divided into he's and she's, or do they both share equally in hunting and in keeping watch and the other duties of dogs? Or do we entrust to the males the entire and exclusive care of the flocks, while we leave the females at home, under the idea that the bearing and suckling their puppies is labor enough for them? Glaucon replies, no, they share alike. The only difference between them is that the males are stronger and the females weaker. Socrates says, but can you use different animals for the same purpose unless they are bred and fed in the same way? Glaucon replies, you cannot. So Socrates then says, then if women are to have the same duties as men, they must have the same nurture and education. So, translation. My translation,
Okay.
then yours.
Yeah.
So Socrates argues through analogy that men and women are equal in responsibility. They both have to do the same thing, if not in ability. So his analogy is that hunting dogs, both male and female, do the same work, and they can do so because they're trained the same. So in terms of commentary on this, in my opinion, this is a pretty sloppy argument on Socrates' part. So first, there's an obvious question as to how far the analogy goes. So would we be, yeah, so you can say hunting dogs and herding dogs, males and females are treated equally, so we should do the same thing with people. But we also feed male and female dogs dog food. So does that mean we should be feeding people dog food? Probably not. Another problem I have with this is that Plato mixes up is and should, which is a problem that we get all the time in philosophy that's very easy to fall into as someone studying philosophy, and Plato mixes it up himself. Is the current system with dogs the best one? Is it good that we have dogs sharing equally in hunting and in herding and whatever? Maybe it would be a better system if we had divided them up in terms of gender. and like finally, his purpose is about, can you use different animals without breeding and feeding in the same way? That's actually just not true in terms of animals. So farmers in America commonly use donkeys to protect a herd, and they don't need the training of a herding dog. Rome famously, after the Greeks, uses geese. And geese, you can't really train them, but they automatically serve as pretty good watchdogs. So other animals can do the same thing without the same training. So I really am not a big fan of this argument from Socrates, or really from Plato, speaking through the form of Socrates. But this is the argument so far. John?
So 我觉得这个论证很清楚，这是第一个苏格拉底的所谓来自自然界的类比论证。那对于苏格拉底同时代的人来说，当然也和我们今天很像。其实在使用公狗。哦，对了，首先狗是一个非常重要的一个象征，因为城市的守卫者某种意义上就是像狗一样在为这个城市警醒，然后在监视这个城市的一个动物的角色。那正因为他们的相似性，所以苏格拉底对于苏格拉底同时代人来说，因为大家不太注意区分公狗和母狗之间的区别，在使用上，在训练上，其实像我们今天一样不会有太大的差别。那苏格拉底当然用这样子的一个反问 Glaucon 说，既然狗作为监护者，他没有做任何的区别，那么人作为监护者，城市的监护者，是不是应该没有区别呢？那当然 Glaucon 就直接接受了苏格拉底的这个反问，他没有进行质疑，这也是 Trevor 不太满意的地方。
All right. Good stuff.
有问题吗 ？Questions?
People seem pretty clear so far. So Socrates feels like he's now defended that men and women, if they have the same responsibilities, they have to be raised up the same. So now he says, I need to go further. He says, although men and women are different, they're not different with regards to things that count for the governing of the state. So, he's like, why is it that men and women can both be entrusted with the same responsibilities? Because they're not different in the way that counts. So Socrates says, suppose that by way of illustration, we were to ask the question whether there is not an imposition in nature between bald men and hairy men. If this is admitted by us, then if bald men are cobblers, we should forbid the hairy men to be cobblers, and conversely. That would be a jest, Glaucon says. Socrates replies, yes, a jest, and why? Because we never meant when we constructed the state that the opposition of nature should extend to every difference, but only to those differences which affected the pursuit in which the individual is engaged. We should have argued, for example, that a physician and one who is in mind of physician may be said to have the same nature. Glaucon says, true. Socrates says, whereas the physician and the carpenter have different natures. Glaucon says, certainly. Socrates replies, and if the male and female sex appear to differ in their fitness for any art or pursuit, we should say that such pursuit or art ought to be assigned to one or the other of them. But if the difference consists only in women bearing and men begetting children, this does not amount to a proof that a woman differs from a man in respect of this sort of education she should receive. We shall therefore continue to maintain that our guardians and their wives ought to have the same pursuits. So Socrates, as always, is arguing by analogy here. He says, there's a difference between a guy with a lot of hair and a guy with no hair, between a hairy man and a bald man. But they can both be cobblers, and cobblers are people who make shoes. So both people can make shoes. It's not an essential difference between them. So he says there is an essential difference between a physician, a doctor, and a carpenter, someone who works with wood. So we need to ask if there's an essential difference between men and women, preventing them from doing the same work. He says, is this the difference between hairy men and bald men, or is it the same as the difference between physicians and carpenters? So this is, in terms of commentary, this is a very Greek argument, and it's a little difficult to understand because of that, because it hinges on the word nature, different natures, right? And it's confusing because Plato is using the word nature for very different meanings. So we get hairy versus bald, which is nature, and that seems to be just appearance. And then he says also physician versus carpenter are also nature. Now it seemed to be choice of profession, although maybe Plato means something more substantial by this, in terms of something about the way they think. And then finally he says nature can also be physical differences. So women bear children, women get pregnant, men beget children, men get women pregnant. So the argument makes sense if we're talking about something about physical differences versus mental differences. Hairy and bald men look different, but is the question, like, are men and women mentally different? And I think I could understand where his argument there. Do men and women just look different, or are they thinking differently? But the physician and the carpenter example seems to suggest something else, maybe something about interest or what they like to do. So again, Plato has made this categorization of the world into physicians and carpenters, hairy men, bald men. And it's like the rationale for this categorization is tough to imagine. I never thought I'd say this, but I sort of miss Aristotle at this point, because I think Aristotle would be more clear. All right, John?
所以so long. OK， 所以在这个对话里面哈，就是苏格拉底呢又继续他的对于关于男女在成为统治者和接受统治者教育或者接受监视者的教育上应当平等的这个论点呢，做出一个继续做他的所谓自然类比的论证。他的论证呢方法其实蛮简单的，就是对于我们来说，为什么一个秃子和一个有头发的人，他们同时都可以成为鞋匠呢？因为秃呢和不秃，这是一个特性或者一个 nature， 但是呢，这个特性对于成为鞋匠来说，它是无关紧要的特性，可能对于成为演员来说是一个很重要的特性，但是对于成为鞋匠来说，它不是一个相关特性。那么对于苏格拉底来说，或者对于柏拉图的苏格拉底来说，到底成为一个国家的统治者是男人和是女人有没有差别呢？那对于苏格拉底来说，当然就很可能是没有差别的，因为就像我们使用公狗和母狗，同样把它们作为监视者来使用，也同样给他们一样的训练。那类似的，我们就应该给男的和女的统治者一样的训练。男的同女的在所谓的自然或者说特性上有没有差别呢？当然有差别，比如说在身体的强弱上，在生孩子的角色上，但是呢，这些特性或者这些自然是和成为国家统治者这个任务并不相关的，所以说这样子一个论证就完成了。不知道大家有没有问题？
Socrates' argument finally comes down to the idea that women share the abilities of men, but only differ in capability. So Glaucon says, you're quite right in maintaining the general inferiority of the female sex. Although many women are in many things superior to many men, yet on the whole, what you say is true. And Socrates says, and if so, my friend, there is no special faculty of administration in a state which a woman has because she is a woman, which a man has by virtue of his sex, but the gifts of nature are alike diffused in both. All the pursuits of men are the pursuits of women also, but in all of them a woman is inferior to a man. Then one woman will have the temper of a guardian, and another not. Was not the selection of the male guardians determined by differences of this sort? Men and women alike possess the qualities which make a guardian. They differ only in their comparative strength or weakness. And in those women who have such qualities are to be selected as the companions and colleagues of men who have similar qualities, whom they resemble in capacity and in character. And ought not the same natures to have the same pursuits. Then, as we were saying before, there is nothing unnatural in assigning music and gymnastics to the wives of guardians. To that point, we come around again. So, the essential argument here is Glaucon says, yes, you're right. Generally speaking, women are worse than men. So these are a bunch of guys talking, so they don't have a problem saying that. Glaucon's like, yeah, that's a good point. Women are generally worse than men. So Socrates says, so there's nothing that women are better at than men. Everything that men do, women also do. Just women are worse than men in all of them. So that means women will be better than, well, some women will be better suited to be a guardian, some will be less suited to be a guardian. He says that's similar to how we chose men. So women who have such qualities, so it would make sense our female guardians to be just pretty much similar to our male guardians. So there's nothing strange or unnatural in assigning music and gymnastic. These are the terms that Socrates uses for culture and physical education to the wives of the guardians. So in terms of commentary on this, what's interesting here is Plato never thinks about putting men and women on the same playing field. Like saying all of we just consider everyone the same and we pick the top 5% of this mixed group to be our guardians. And I think that's strange because that's what our argument would be, is that women can be equal or better to men, and if they are, then they should be allowed to do the same thing as men. But Plato takes a different point of view. If women are better than other women at one thing, they should be trained in that thing. And it doesn't matter how good they are compared to men. And to my mind, that's saying, like, we should take the tallest person in a class of midgets and train them to play basketball, because they're the tallest person in this class of midgets. It seems like, yeah, they'll be better than their classmates. They'll be better than the other midgets. But it still seems like not a great use of coaching resources to devote all this effort towards training a midget to play basketball. So that's my analogy, which is perhaps less elegant than a Platonic analogy. But I think you guys understand the point. All right.
So can we understand that he means that in the case of when men winning, they are just different, so to say, quantitatively, not qualitatively. So there's basically no difference. Everybody should be selected based on their marriage, in this case, as guardians. It's actually no discrimination. No.
So, I mean, so he basically says you have two pools of people. You have the men and the women, and you pick, of these men, you pick the ones who are best to be the guardians, to be your guardians. Of these women, you pick the ones who are best to be the guardians as your guardians. And then you match them up. So in terms of the quantitative qualitative difference, I'm not sure about that because it seems I don't know entirely. But yeah, so that's Plato's idea, is you compare them to their own gender.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, 就是我也不知道在这段应该翻译什么，但是呢，主要的意思就是当然柏拉图是承认，柏拉图和格劳孔他们两个人都承认女性在很多特质上确实是弱于男性的，但这并不妨碍他们成为一个国家的监视者，就像不妨碍很多人成为很好的运动员一样。虽然女性在很多身体上或者说在精神上会有劣势，那同样的女性能够成为监视者，女性能够成为很好的运动员。如果我们选择他们中间最好的人，并且呢又是回到之前的问题，就是国家的统治者一定是要这些最好的男性和女性进行交配，然后所生产的后代。基本上还是刚才的观点。
So Socrates now defends common wives and common children. So he assumes the guardians are the best citizens of the society. Remember, the Greeks have very strong ideas about good men, better men, and also good women and better women. And then from there, eugenics. And what is the Chinese word for eugenics?
优生。U is for you.
Yeah.
And genetics is shen, like birds.优生.
So that's eugenics?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So then clearly the next thing will be to make matrimony sacred in the highest degree. What is most beneficial will be deemed sacred. How can marriages be made most beneficial? That is a question which I put to you because I see in your house dogs for hunting, the nobler sort of birds, not a few. Now I beseech you, do tell me, have you ever attended their pairing and breeding? Do you breed from them all indifferently, or do you take care to breed from the best only? Do you take the oldest or the youngest, or only those of ripe age? And if care was not taken in the breeding, your dogs and birds would greatly deteriorate. Good heavens, my dear friend, what consummate skill will our rulers need if the same principle holds of the human species? Because our rulers will often have to practice upon the body corporate with medicines. Now you know that when patients do not require medicines, but have only to be put under a regimen, the inferior sort of practitioner is deemed to be good enough. When medicine has to be given, then the doctor should be more of a man. I mean that our rulers will find a considerable dose of falsehood and deceit necessary for the good of their subjects. We are saying that the use of all these things regarded as medicines might be of advantage. This lawful use of them seems likely to be often needed in the regulations of marriages and births. Why? The principle has already been laid down that the best of either sex should be united with the best as often, the inferior with the inferior, as seldom as possible. Should rear the offspring of the one sort of union, but not of the other, the flock is to be maintained in first-rate condition. Now these goings-on must be a secret, which the rulers only know. There will be a further danger of our herd, as the guardians may be termed, breaking out into rebellion. So, Socrates is trying to make marriage sacred, and he defines sacred as best. And he says, what's best? Well, let's use this analogy of dogs and birds. And remember, Plato is an aristocrat. He grew up breeding dogs and breeding birds. So he's like, when you breed a dog, you breed from the best. And you take care that you're breeding them at the right age. And if you didn't, you'd be upset. It would be bad news. He says, the rulers of our city should be doing the same thing for people. And then he makes another analogy. If our rulers are like doctors healing the body corporate, healing the body of the city, well, they're going to have to be very careful with their medicine. And the medicine here is going to be lying to them, lying to everyone in the city. And he says, we're especially going to have to lie about marriages and births. And he says, so that means you have to, in order to make sure the city is as good as possible, we have to lie to everyone. And what's interesting is it's only the rulers of the city. It's not even all the guardians. So I think in terms of commentary on this, so we've got the same problem analogy as before. Like, so first of all, this is true for dogs and for birds, but is it also true for people? You know, not everything that's true for dogs is true for people. There's also is versus should. You know, this is the way that people interact with their dogs and their birds, but should this be the way you interact with your dogs or your birds? And then now there's also this crucial question of morality. And you would think that to forbid most of your city from having children, which, you know, in any society is one of the fundamental things that people care about, like having kids. You know, it's what parents care about, it's what grandparents care about. So to forbid most people from having kids and then to lie to them about it seems to be a really immoral act to me. Like, that seems to be really wrong. But Plato doesn't blink, and you know, Socrates, speaking as Plato, doesn't blink. He never stops to think this is a bad thing. He just says, "Oh, it's for the best of the city. Doesn't matter." So in the end, I think we have to. You know, someone asked about in the beginning about the utilitarian standpoint. I would say you could certainly think of this from a utilitarian point of view in terms of, you know, pleasure versus pain. Even if Socrates was right about this will produce, you know, some sort of perfect city, is it worth the fact that you're lying to all these people and in a really terrible way? And I think the answer is no. You know, I think whether you're Kant saying you're treating people as an end or as a means, not as an end, or whether you're, you know, Bentham saying from a utilitarian standpoint, you're causing a lot of pain, it's really hard to justify this on a moral level as something that a government should do. Anyways, John?
I don't quite understand the logic of this passage. Where is it? Because, okay, here. What he means, it seems to me here, is that, yeah, if somebody needs medicine, you send a real good doctor to him.
Yeah.
If someone doesn't need it, you just try to lie to him. You are under curement right now, but what he sends is just a normal doctor, which actually cannot cure so well, but yeah, still good for the patient because he thinks that he is still being cured. And yeah, what is the corresponding funding situation in the government of a country.
So let's be clear about this analogy. Socrates says, if the body of a city is like the body of a person, we'll have to take care of it.
Sure.
He says there's sort of when we think about ancient Greek doctors, there's two sorts of things. There's medicines, so like drugs, and then there's also a regimen, and the doctor says this is what you should do, this is what you should be eating. So he says when we're just talking about regimens, it's good enough to have a not great doctor who just says like sleep well, eat well.
That's not a lie. I mean.
So his idea of the medicine is we need the best doctor to give medicine correctly. And in that sense, he's saying we need a really good ruler who will be able to very accurately and sneakily tell lies that'll do the right thing and no one will find it out. So that's his analogy. Is like, a good ruler will be like a good doctor. So.
Tell very good lies.
Yeah, you tell very good lies. And I think this is Plato trying to justify why it's okay to do this. And he's just sort of doing it in a sneaky way. He's like, oh man, these rulers, they're so great at their job at lying to people. And I don't think he ever tries to tackle it head on as to, is this a moral act? Instead, he tries to like sneak in the back door and just say like, shouldn't we all join together and like praise our rulers for how good they are at lying? So yeah, that's my impression of this.
Great. So should I do the translation right now? Okay, so 所以又回到刚才最重要的问题，就是统治者什么样才是一个好的统治者？可能按照Trevor 的读法的话，那应该所有的统治者的本职工作就是撒一个谎，对城市进行优生，对孩子进行选择，然后呢给最好的孩子最好的教育，然后呢这一切的一切可能都要借着谎言的名义，不是借着谎言，都要通过谎言的形式来完成。那一个好的统治者当然是能够精确打击或者能够精确的说一些谎言的统治者。所以这是一个非常奇怪的途径，这也是我刚才问 Trevor 的问题，就是到底一个好的医生和庸医，就是一个庸医是不能给药的，到底反映在他类比的政治家上有什么差别？那 Trevor 的意思是好的医生或者说好的政治家，那当然就是能够给一些更 But the medicine doesn't cure anything. I mean, in this sense, if it's a lie, it does.
It keeps the body healthy.
Yeah, in the sense that everybody stays in his place, and I got it.
Yeah.
所以说，好的药就像好的谎言一样，就是让大家，比如说让更好的孩子能够得到更好的生存，让一些铁做的，就是可能资质比较低下的人民。待在他自己应该有的位置上，而不多求。So another question: If it's a lie, does he really believe there is a difference between people, or he just means everybody stays in his original place, so it's for the good of the city?
So this isn't about everyone staying in their place. This is so to make sure each generation is as healthy and smart and whatever as possible. But yeah, in terms of he does believe there is a difference between people, because he says there should be he says there should be each generation, generally speaking, the guardian's children become guardians, soldiers' children become soldiers, workers' children become workers. But he says it's much easier for the normal people to understand why this should be if you lie to them and you say it's really because gold versus silver versus iron.
So do I think out of analogy, we also see that there are good dogs, there are somehow not so, so tamed dogs. So there should be something different
Yeah.
between a human being. Yeah.
Yeah, which is certainly true. I mean, when you breed dogs, like you try to breed just the best dog.
That's realistic.
Yeah.
Realistic.
And that's Plato again. Like Plato does this. It's growing up as a wealthy young man in Athens.
Yeah. He said it's very Machiavellian.
Ah,
of course.
So if it's Machiavellian, that's a interesting question. Is it? We'll find out for the next class when we go over Machiavelli. So in terms of the Republic, how Plato argued, he argues mostly deductively, and it's in the Socratic style. We have these analogies and we have these categorization, but his principles, his ethics, and even his categorizations, even his definitions, seem quite strange to us. So, conclusion. Plato's Republic ends up being very influential and very ambitious. Also very weird, as I've said before, to use my Chinese, 很奇怪的事情. Yeah. And based on some questionable logic. And it seems to me, though Plato's Republic, we really clearly see the limits of the Socratic argument, the Socratic dialogue, because this whole book is a Socratic argument, and it makes his reasoning pretty clear, but it doesn't come up with a particularly good idea of a city. In fact, ironically, it seems worse in a lot of ways than the cities around him. Like, it seems worse than Athens, which presumably just people planned, but it wasn't like a big grand plan from the beginning. So we need someone else to help us form a city. Instead of a philosopher like Plato, we need a man of the world. We need someone who's seen states rise and fall and carefully observed the reasons why. In short, we need Machiavelli. We'll see his ideas next time in terms of how to build a city, how to build a country. All right, cool stuff. So next time Machiavelli, coming towards the end of the course. We have four more people, and then we're done, which is pretty crazy. It's been fun, and then of course next round will come up in not too long. So yeah, this time was Plato. Next time is Machiavelli. I know you guys are busy, but do your homework. Read the text. Do your homework. Ask questions on QQ. Ask questions on Reddit. Yeah. All right, cool. We have like a couple minutes, so if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask. And as always, thank you for the flowers. What do you think of Plato, John?
Yeah, I think his thinking also speaks quite a lot later in his life. He may never think it's realistic to build a republic. Someone argued that, actually. Someone argues that. So I'm not sure what he's doing with his republic. Is he doing some, thinking experiments, or is he really hating his city? I'm not sure. It's really hard to get his own idea, especially he has
Socrates as a mouthpiece, and then he has Socrates even say, "Well, I'm not sure about my ideas."
Yeah. He may not agree with Socrates in many points, but he's Socrates. I mean, so it's very clear.
Yeah. We have a question. What is the meaning of republic? Republic. It's complicated, and the definition isn't very well defined in Plato's time. I'd say if you use the republic now, you mean like a republican form of government. So you have people elect representatives.
It's only a translation. The
Yeah.
original word means city-state, nothing else.
Yeah. So in Plato's time, republic just means you can think of government or whatever.
Yeah, a government also, yeah.
Yeah.
Or form of government, an attempt form of government.
Yeah.
Nobody knows. Yeah.
All right, good question. Yeah, I sort of wonder if there are other similar books written that have since been lost. If Plato was just like a bunch of people tried to make a perfect city, like Plato did.
Quite a lot actually. Yeah. Seneca. I forgot.
Did you?
But I really like that sentence here. It's a Latin sentence which means be daring to. You can correct me. Be daring to be brave. Because the truth will liberate you. You can
Close.
put in
Close.
You can put in better English.
So Sapra is more than
Daring.
well. Sapra, my impression was it means to know. So aude means dare. So
Yeah.
it's the imperative form, right?
Yeah.
Audacious, aude.
Yeah.
Dare to know.
Dare to know, yeah.
Of which the truth will set you free.
Yeah.
So, which is Kant, and sort of the unofficial motto, or maybe the official motto of Lonely Reader. So, yeah. So he's in terms of best women versus best men. He says Glaucon says, well, some of the women are better than some of the men in some things. And they say generally it does seem like all the women are worse than the men. And Socrates says, yeah, all the women are worse than all the men, but the best women and best men should become guardians. So he's not very big on gender equality. All right, so it is 10:59. So if you guys have any more questions, QQ, Reddit, do your homework, read, get excited for Machiavelli. Bye-bye. Always a pleasure.